Hello, we're here today with Dora Chomiak, who was born in New York City but grew up outside of Washington, D.C., who spoke Ukrainian for 3 generations as soon as I know, yes?
In one house, yep.
In one house, oh my God, that's been a while. And I also know that you're a media manager, and the first Ukrainian media that appeared in Ukraine, you were the one who was investing in them and who believed in their creation. Mm-hmm. How would you say, is there any difference that you can see, and what do you see maybe the future of the Ukrainian media?
There is, first of all, a tremendous difference, a huge difference. I was fortunate enough to come here to work in the fall of 1991.
So 25 years since you were traveling to Ukraine
Well,
already.
yes, my first trip here was in 1989. I came for a few visits with university programs and wrote my senior thesis on local city government in Lviv during the Soviet period still, and about what kind of system needs to be put in place for there to be water 24 hours a day. So I got my degree from Princeton University and was able to come here initially to work at the Renaissance Foundation, the International Renaissance Foundation, which had been founded as an independent organization by George Soros. So I came here, I thought, I'll come here for a year. It'll be a good experience. I speak
and how it
Ukrainian.
turned out in the end.
I speak Ukrainian, I speak Russian. It'll be an interesting thing to do for a year. So I told my friends, I'll be back in a year. And 1 year turned into another year and turned into another year. So it was about 3 years that I was here full-time working. And in that time, I met a lot of very interesting journalists here in KU from all over Ukraine. And we started collaborating, first some roundtable discussions, and then we were able to get some money from various non-governmental sources. And we created together the first alternatives to the only game in town at the time
that was financed
television.
by government.
Yep, it was only state television news on Hryshchatyk 26, and that was it. So we created an alternative to that. We created a news agency that's still around called Unyan. We created an international media center that had a press center in it, that had various production facilities in it. We launched a TV program called Vikna, which was a news show.
One of the first informative shows in Ukraine.
Yep. We created a network of TV stations that started popping up around the country called Unika. So at the time, and it's hilarious to think about now, because here we are, we've got the internet everywhere. You've got your phone and you're frustrated when you don't have a Wi-Fi signal. What do you mean I don't have a Wi-Fi signal? At the time, there was no access to there was no internet. Well, there was an internet. There was no browser. But there also was a shortage of video cassettes. So what we used to do was different TV stations would record pieces of a show. We would edit it together in KU into a show about news all over Ukraine once a week on these giant VHS tapes and SVHS, Chomiak. And then we would make copies of the tape and send them the one tape, because there was only one tape, and it would go by train from city to city, and each TV station would pop it into the machine, put it on the air,
was a
run
whole
it.
Piece of work to do in the end.
Yes.
And what would you say now? Because I'm looking through sometimes internet channels in US, and what I see now is that during the revolution, most of Ukrainian channels, and in particular our channel, got much more viewers than US internet channels on their top on YouTube.
And this is the really fun part, because Ukraine has been able to leapfrog over the United States and over other countries in using the internet, both as a way to receive information and as a way to distribute information. So in November, December, when all of these things started happening here, it was mind-blowing and fantastic for me to be in New York City and being able to watch the stream.
What is happening in exact this moment.
Right now. And I would follow on Twitter and Facebook and your feeds, which was, I mean, so you ask, has anything changed? When I came here in 1991, there was a limited number of telephone lines between the entire Soviet Union, because it was the Soviet Union when I came here, and the entire United States. So if I wanted to talk to my friend in New York, I'd have to go to Hlavpochtamp on Maidan. I would have to make an appointment for 3 days in the future. And then I would have to come back, sit in one of those small phone booths and talk on the phone. And that was, and then we got a computer that allowed us to have text-only email. Oh, revolutionary. Oh my gosh.
That's
and it was just black screen, white text, and that was it. So now what's tremendous is people in Ukraine can distribute information anywhere in the world, much as we're doing right now. And people from all over the world can take a look directly into what's happening in Ukraine, which is a vast change.
We could see that in Egypt, but that was mostly Twitter thing.
Yes.
And here it was like everything.
And that's why I love working in this space of technology and innovation, because it moves so fast.
Would you say there's still a future in a television as it is right now, or it will further go into an internet?
You know, I've been thinking about this a lot over the past, because I got involved in radio in the late 80s.
And you've been doing your school in Columbia University. It was in media management.
It was an MBA in media management. And that was in the crazy days when cell phones came out and Palm handheld. So
and you couldn't imagine that changes back then.
Just so many changes. So I think I really do believe that all media is additive, like McLuhan said, that, you know, radio existed, newspapers exist, telegraph, radio, television, now the internet. The other stuff will stay, and it will be changed by the new stuff, but the new stuff won't totally replace it. But in order, and for companies in America struggle with this a lot because they're used to doing things a certain way. Media companies, whether it's television stations or newspapers or magazines.
And they can hardly do this change now? Would you say
it's
that?
Very hard.
It is hard.
It's hilarious for me to come here in this country that has gone through tremendous change over the past 25 years and tell you, change is hard.
Yes.
but there's no, I've worked with magazines in the United States in the late 90s and early 2000s and really had to drag them online because they'd been publishing magazines a certain way for 100 years. And they needed to have some kind of presence on the web. And it was very difficult for people to change their thinking. And as I'm sure you can appreciate, it always takes longer than you think it will. Than you think it will. And that's certainly what I've seen here. But the media here is really doing exciting stuff with, yes, Twitter, like in Egypt, but what's really been interesting here is the live stream of video feeds from hundreds of thousands of telephones. So really everybody is a publisher, everybody is a broadcaster now, as long as they have access to the internet. What
would you say Ukrainian media lacks right now? Because you've been connected to most of the Ukrainian independent media, and you were the person who first got any kind of a funding to establish them. What would you say now have to be changed, and where we should go further just to be more interesting as an investment project?
I'd say right now what the media in Ukraine need to really develop is more and faster. So more people doing more different kinds of things of very high quality. And that doesn't mean it has to be a broadcast television quality, but whatever it is, whatever format you're in, whether you're creating something on YouTube, whether you're doing an audio slideshow, whether you're doing a podcast, whatever it is, it needs to be high quality, and there needs to be more of it. And I that's sort of my blanket statement for what Ukraine needs overall. Ukraine needs more brain cells working at a high capacity.
That's really interesting, because it seems that we have so many very intelligent people, like scientists, journalists, etc., who knows all of the languages, like 5 languages, it's no problem. But in the end, we've got that problem with the quality sometimes.
There's always a problem with quality all over the world. But what's here is the problem with quantity of quality. And the realization that, how do I say this? The task at hand is rather difficult, because the first thing people in Ukraine need to do consistently and explicitly and louder, is show yourselves as citizens of Ukraine. Because no and I'm going to explain myself in a minute, but know that you are going to be perceived mostly around the world through the lens of Moscow. So I need to refer to a fantastic article that came out in last week's magazine, The New Yorker, written by a guy named Keith Gesson. And he's an American. He emigrated to from the Soviet Union when he was 6 years old. He's, whatever, 30-something. He came to KU, stayed here for a few days, and wrote a terrific article. And embedded in the article is a very telling paragraph where he writes about, to the reader, he says, look, you need to understand how difficult it is for someone like me, for anyone from a Russian-speaking world, how much work we need to do on ourselves, intellectually and even emotionally and even spiritually, to comprehend that Ukraine is a separate country. So here's the first guy I've seen who has explicitly stated a theme that is woven through every conversation about anything Ukraine I've ever had with anybody anywhere in the world, particularly in the United States. And that is this notion that Ukraine is a country, there are citizens of Ukraine, it's a pluralistic country, there are many different ethnic groups, there are many different religious groups, there are many different backgrounds. It is a country, it has borders, there's a passport, you go through passport control, it's, like people live here.
It's a country.
It's a country. At the end, it's a country, get over it. But here's this guy who's an American, like me. Well, except he was born in the Soviet Union, but he grew up essentially in the same school system that I do. Finally admitting how hard it has been for him,
not to
intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually, to acknowledge that Ukraine exists. So precisely because of that, the task of media in Ukraine is
like giving this statement that there is a country, we're the citizens, and here what's going on.
Right, exactly. And this is our voice telling it. So
that's actually the goal of the program. Yeah. Which is the first English-speaking program.
Right,
hopefully there would be more.
Exactly, because, like it or not, most of the world speaks English. As I like to say, the lingua franca now is English. That's just the way it is. So the stories of people here, which are such good stories, and like you say, so many very qualified, brilliant people here, are locked up because it's not told in English. And so I'm very pleased, both with your work and with the work of so many different people here who now have access to both create and distribute the stories. What's the word in English? Bezpośrednio. Without barriers.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Is tremendous.
But we have, for example, this channel Russia Today, and that's a problem that some Western media are citing them without understanding that there can be actually a media outside of Russia that could be totally corrupted. And with the Ukrainian media, would you say we definitely need it? Because what I heard, and that's why we launched this program, that there were so many requests that we need this information in English. We need the information on Ukraine and about Ukraine.
There is not enough information from many different sources about Ukraine and from Ukraine. And here I need to put the spotlight on an organization that's done a tremendous amount of work in a very short amount of time to tackle this very thing. And it's a nonprofit in the United States called Razom for Ukraine, togetherforukraine.org is the URL. They've done a lot of great work. One of the things they've done is put together a panel of legal experts at New-York University, at NYU, and wrote a white paper on the situation in Ukraine from a legal perspective. And just last Thursday, they presented it at the United Nations. And here they spell out in 40, 50 pages, maybe more, what is happening in Ukraine. How does it tie to the Constitution?
In this perspective.
From the legal perspective. And here are international scholars of law from all over the world writing this analysis in English. And they've just translated into Ukrainian. And the number of journalists who are now citing that report is fantastic. And I've started working with this group. It's a fantastic group of people who happen to have emigrated from Ukraine sometime in the past 10 years, have lots of family over here. They're all professional programmers, lawyers, bankers, whatever. And they got together around the Maidan and have created a terrific organization. I'm very pleased now that I'm on their operating board because they're smart and they're fast and they're doing exactly what you say, which is providing information in English about Ukraine.
because people don't know that. If they have Russian sources, they have the exact opposite of the information that is really going on, and of all the journalists that we are talking with. But coming back to the part of, I would say, business and investment, what would you say? We know that there were really, really bad sides, and Russia is trying to present all this situation, political situation, as a Nazi, fascist, etc., etc. But we can see now that the financial aid is coming back to Ukraine. But it's not only financial aid that Ukrainian is interested in. Basically, those are business projects. And I know that you were involved in a lot of brand consulting, this kind of things. So what would you say would be the most interesting for the investors abroad to invest in Ukraine, and what changes in Ukrainian business sphere should be made?
I think that's a great question. I think there's so much potential and so much talent here and I'm seeing some of it take more and more root, specifically around two areas. One is the fantastic tradition and depth of software engineering and computer skills, the whole kind of cybernetica, whole kind of field, cybernetics, which there's a lot of depth and you need a lot of that. And that's great, all that coding. At the same time, there's a lot of innovation in media and in social media, and there's a lot of creativity. There's a strong kind of creative class.
Yes.
And so the blend of the programmers with the kind of creative designers without having a big culture clash, but true blend, is huge potential for that. I've started working I'm active as an angel investor in the States, so in a very early stage startups and technology. And I spoke with a friend of mine who has been here at a conference of various startups that get together with investors and so forth. He was here in October, just before the Maidan started. And he came back and I said, okay, John, what did you see? What was your first trip to Ukraine? What did you think? And he said something very interesting. He said, I've been to these conferences in Russia and in Belarus, and they had I was expecting to see a lot of geeky, heavy, hard technology, artificial intelligence kind of projects. And I saw lots of media and social and interactive projects that were interesting, which I think is a great observation, because it's sort of like the innovation that you're doing here. You guys are using technology to innovate how you distribute news.
In this or that way, yes.
Right. And so I would say with any investment, you need to go with people who know what they're doing. Right? So people in Ukraine need to show that they know what they're doing. There needs to be a stability and expectation. So the laws have to be somewhat stable, although early stage investors have higher risk appetite, so they can handle more. So I would go for the early stage investors. But at the end of the day, investors invest in people, especially early stage investors. So everything that people with a brain can do to build their own personal brand in a transparent way, the better. So for example, if you can take yourself and your name and build a platform and make sure your LinkedIn profile is clean, make sure make sure it exists, make sure it's clean, make sure your accomplishments are listed there and that they're verifiable. So people can check up on you, like, did you really have that show? And how many times did it come out? That kind of stuff. The more visible you can be, the more transparent you can be.
Would you say that this personality branding it's one of the most interesting things for investors abroad too?
I think, look, I don't know if it's the most interesting, but if in the absence of a culture of investing in startups and a track record, you've got to build your own track record.
Yes.
And particularly in an environment where there's political uncertainty and economic uncertainty, you need to grab onto something. And so you can grab onto an idea and onto a person. So the more transparent you can be, you don't have to wait for the laws to be written. Just be transparent. Put yourself out there.
Just be the person who would be the change.
Exactly. Be the person that you are, and then people can decide, well, do I trust this person or not? Is this the right team? Do they have a good chemistry of this team? What can they develop? And particularly use the fact that it's a rapidly changing environment to your advantage. So startups now is a very popular term of pivot, right? So meaning we started with this business plan and we launched it in the market. We saw that people weren't interested, so we had a pivot, and we did something else. So, hello.
And it explains a lot. It explains basically everything.
All of Ukraine or rather the past 20, whatever, 2 years of Ukraine have been pivot after pivot. So y'all just know how to pivot, right? So, but in order to do that, you have to trust people, and that's one way of getting there.
Yeah, so hopefully we will have this situation when Ukrainians will understand it better, and I hope after this program they will understand it better.
Yes.
I'm just reminding you that I had this amazing guest today, Dora Chomiak, who was one of the first investors in Ukrainian independent media and helped to build it up. Also, we talked about brand consulting and how to make Ukrainian business more investable, let's say that.
It's a good term.
So we will be back with you with a new guest, which I'm sure you will be interested to listen. And goodbye till next time.